Who is a good person who turned out to be shockingly evil? Bill Cosby. He was untouchable, he was the silly uncle we all wanted. Turns out he was a monster. What's weird is that his shit wasn't even hidden, just not talked about in the mainstream. I remember watching 30 Rock, and they made a joke about him, and I was confused. I googled it and there were tons of articles and interviews from his various victims, and I was even more confused how he was walking free. This was around 2008 or so, way before Me Too was a thing. That's how I feel about R. Kelly. One of the biggest jokes in the US at one point was a fake R. Kelly song about wanting to piss on people. I never saw the video, but didn't the girl in that infamous video look like clearly young? And there was the whole Aaliyah marriage? I was too young to be thinking about all this critically, but it seems like it was right there in all of our faces. One of his victims went to the police, I think it was in the late 80s. Nothing happened then, she was basically dismissed. He was no Uncle Phil, that's for sure. That is the uncle we all want, need and love. Subway's Jared. He was just a man trying to get into smaller jeans. Take my outfit, you sick bastard. Went from having a mild cholesterol problem to a child molesтерol problem. I know, right? All he had to do was eat sandwiches and not rape kids. Jimmy Savile. The guy raised millions upon millions of pounds for charity. Some places listing it at £45 million, nearly $60 million, and set up a £5 million charity fund before he died. But it was all a facade to hide what he really was. To call him an evil piece of shit would be an insult to shit. Fun little fact, back in the 70s Jimmy Savile tried his hand at wrestling, as kind of a promotional act. His first and only match, was against exotic Adrian Street, a wrestler with a flamboyant, borderline gay gimmick. Before the match, Adrian heard Savile bragging about sleeping with underage girls, so during the match Adrian proceeded to legitimately beat the absolute shit out of Savile, and even ripped out chunks of his hair. Years after, Adrian would say, if I knew the true extent of what he did, I would have killed him. Adrian Street was a goddamn legend. Reported allegations covering a period of 50 years, including 214 alleged acts by Savile which, though uncorroborated, have been formally recorded as crimes, some involving children as young as 8. The report states within the recorded crimes there are 126 indecent acts and 34 rape penetration offences. Alleged offences took place at 13 hospitals as well as on BBC premises, according to the report. I want to go hide in a hole now. He didn't just molest children, he molested terminal children in hospital, he molested dead children in the morgue. And disabled children, and intellectually disabled children. There weren't any limits to his depravity. For those unaware, the man had a show where he would have children write in and have their dreams come true. He sadly routinely used that for his crimes. However, I'd like to point out one episode in particular. One child wrote in saying their wish was to be in an episode of Doctor Who, and as a result, the show put on a short segment of Doctor Who with the kid able to be alongside Colin Baker, the Doctor at the time of broadcast, as well as Janet Fielding as his companion. Then that guy comes on set after the scene is finished and the main show continues like normal. Now here's the key thing, Colin Baker, from all his decades on TV, has been described as nothing but a perfectly nice, lovely and affable man. He thought the segment wasn't good at all, but he did it to grant the kid a wish. Now, when that guy comes on set at the end to resume the main show, look at Colin, he can't put his finger on it, but you know he can tell that there is something OFF about this guy. When Janet has her hand kissed, she inches closer to Colin for comfort. But key here is that Colin tries to keep the kid close to him and away from the guy. After everything was exposed, Colin came out saying that while he didn't realize how horrific the crimes were, which I believe, but he was able to sense that he was a creep, so tried to help the kid as best as possible, true to the character he was playing. The man was a monster, hidden in plain sight. People could tell he was a monster, but he was shielded until it was too late. Jim Jones was a prominent figure in support of the civil rights movement. He contributed significantly to desegregation activism in Indiana. He also performed a lot of charity work, establishing soup kitchens and providing food and clothing to the poor. What a nice man. Seems like he could leverage those acts into some sort of group following. I wonder what happened to him. It really saddens me when I see people blame and criticize his victims. He was a charismatic leader with a powerful, persuasive voice. Majority of the People's Temple were black and he promised them safety and liberation. They eventually followed Jones to Guyana because he told them the US was too unsafe, racism was still rampant, fascism was an imminent threat, but in Guyana they would be safe and live peacefully away from such threats. They would live in paradise. I think people are too confident in their belief that they could never be sucked into a cult. It could happen to anyone, and once you're in it's so hard to get out. The Pinkertons, and Alan Pinkerton, were big abolitionists and were heavily involved with Lincoln and the Union in the Civil War. They hired their first woman detective like 50 years before the first woman police officer, and they started off quite principled in what they would and wouldn't do in their work. Eventually they just became the private militia for the richest people in the country to intimidate and gun down regular workers. Neil Gaiman. That one hurt. A lot. I loved his books. The pain and betrayal. I cried when I realized he was in my state for a book tour and I missed it. I'm glad I didn't go now obviously, but fuck, man. Stardust is my favorite book. That last line still makes me sob. And it was written by a piece of shit. I can't even crack my favorite book Good Omens anymore. I adored his books, but I can't support him anymore. I'll stick to Sam Vims. If it helps, Pratchett had said that he wrote 75% of that book, certainly all the humor is him. That guy Fluke Skywalker, John Stevens. He was a Mark Hamill lookalike. He would dress up as Luke Skywalker and attend charity events, visit sick children in hospitals, did a bunch of fundraising for non-profits, etc. But secretly he was consuming and distributing CSAM with, mostly, girls younger than 10, with what prosecutors described as too graphic to be publicly detailed. He was liked by a lot of people. He was prominent on Imager with his posts always reaching the front page with people calling him a legend, a hero, etc. I know I even upvoted some of his posts. He was arrested in 2023 and committed suicide a couple of months later while out on bond. Yeah, that one hurt. I believe Mark Hamill had even boosted some of the charity work Stevens was doing at one point. Just a shockingly sad and fucked up situation. Rolf Harris, he went from Jake the Peg to just Anther sexual predator who assaults little girls. Someone I know paid £15,000 for one of his paintings as an investment 2 weeks before it became public knowledge. He can't sell it for love nor money now. Dr. Phil deserves to have his license taken away. They can't take away what he doesn't have. He has a PhD, but he is not licensed to practice since 2006. I have never liked Oprah and any of her spawn. She gave us Phil, Ounce, and Vance. Not a good track record. King Leopold of the Belgians. He presented himself as a humanitarian who was motivated by a desire to improve the lives of Africans. He was allowed to establish personal rule over what was then the Congo Free State. In reality, his regime caused the death of millions of Congolese inhabitants, including children. They were worked to death at gunpoint, systematically mutilated, murdered or starved to death. Easily one of the most evil people in human history. O.J. Simpson. Younger people may not realize this, but before the murders, O.J. Simpson was almost considered to be a national treasure. It was truly shocking when he was arrested. David Eddings. An author I fell in love with in the late 80s. I eagerly awaited sequels to his series. In his biography he was described as a college professor that struggled to make it as an author. And then years after his death it became known that he and his wife adopted 2 children they horribly abused and tortured, resulting in a prison sentence. I used to reread his books at least once a year, and now I can't help to feel nauseated whenever I see his books in my bookcase. Some might say Elon Musk, but I never liked that SOB. The Thai cave rescue situation was a mask-off moment for me. Calling the diver a pedophile because he rejected the use of a robot that Musk offered because it wouldn't actually be able to do the job. It was the first major peek into the narcissism that's on full display these days. The cave diver was an undeniable hero. He risked his own life and was one of only a few people capable of completing the rescue, and Elon uses his gigantic platform and reach to call him a pedo simply because Elon's fragile ego got challenged. I still can't believe the cave diver didn't win that open-shut lawsuit. There's a fantastic documentary about the rescue mission called The Rescue. While it doesn't address the situation with Elon, it's pretty obvious when seeing the maps and simulations that Elon's proposed submarine would not be able to assist with the rescue. What a sad, fragile little man Elon is. Can't handle being challenged by a hero who is actually the world's leading expert in his field. Oprah, not saying she was pure evil. But she platformed dudes like Dr. Phil and Dr. Ounce whose careers have caused lots of harm. Ian Watkins, who was the lead singer of the band Lost Prophets, absolute monster. Oliver Cromwell pretty much set the modern template for revolutionary turned tyrant. Came from a humble background to overthrow an oppressive king and established one of the first modern democracies. War hero. Champion of democracy, etc. Then made himself dictator and appointed his son heir. Followed up by banning Christmas and ethnically cleansing Ireland. Very weird character arc. Neil Gaiman. I'm so beyond disappointed and furious. I used to really look up to him. The dad from Seventh Heaven. Turned out to be a real piece of shit. Bill Cosby. If you are of a certain age, it's a fall of staggering social distance. He went from America's dad to a monster in a matter of weeks. My father was born in 1939. We owned all or most of Cosby's stand-up albums. I listened to them all the time as a kid. One day I came home to visit and I saw all the album covers in the recycle basket. He had broken the LPs. I asked why and Dad replied simply, "Guy's a rapist." In my small, rural Indiana hometown, we had this well-respected DARE officer who later became mayor, who later was convicted of soliciting minors and possession of CP. Dan Schneider and the rest of those Nickelodeon goons. Since nobody said it. Bass Nectar. EDM artist with a damn near cult following. Dude preached tolerance and love and safe spaces and shit, but then turned out to allegedly be a pedophile with paid hush money to underage girls and did a bunch of other manipulative and abusive shit. Evidence seems pretty damning though. Unsure where the current legal affairs are at. Stopped following a while ago. I'm waiting for Joel Osteen to be proven to have done something heinous just so that fucking smile won't be shown publicly again. John Wayne Gacy was literally a clown who met President Carter's wife, so I'd say that he was interpreted for a good person for a time.